Ask the Minister for Finance the plans, if any, he has regarding the issue of cars for young families who are dependent on the second-hand car market for transport to schools, third-level institutions and work. The latest figures from the CSO show that there is 2.2 million licensed cars in the country. That's 64% of the vehicles in this country are 6 years and older.
Minister.
Thank you very much. At the outset, you should note that neither the Government nor the Minister for Finance have a role in dictating the list price of vehicles which are decided by car manufacturers or indeed by car dealerships. My colleague, the Minister for Transport, has overall policy responsibility for transport policy, including managing the National Vehicle and Driver File, which is a database containing details of all 2.5 million registered vehicles and their owners, as well as the 2.6 million licensed drivers in the country. The role of the Department of Finance, on the other hand, is limited to the taxation of vehicles, namely vehicle registration tax, motor tax, VAT and benefit in kind. Regarding taxation, VRT is an emissions-based tax, and therefore the amount of VRT incurred will vary across different vehicle makes and models. The charge is determined by the open market selling price of the vehicle. While there were no changes to VRT as part of Budget 2023, recent reform to the rate structure has provided for increased VRT rates for high-emission vehicles, while lower-emission vehicles continue to incur low rates of VRT. This reflects the environmental rationale of the tax and underpins government commitments to decarbonise road transport. It is important to note that VRT is a tax chargeable on the first registration of vehicles in the state, and was not chargeable on second-hand cars sourced here. The EU VAT directive requires that VAT on motor vehicles should be charged at the standard rate, which in Ireland is 23%. While the standard rate can be as low as 15%, it should be noted that any decrease would have to be applied to all services and supplies which come within this category, and would cost the Exchequer €575 million for every 1% reduction in that rate. For cars that are being imported into the state, VRT and VAT are also chargeable. This includes vehicles that are imported from into the state from the UK from the date it left EU Single Market and Customs Union, January 2021. The movement of goods from Great Britain into the EU is an importation from a third country. In accordance with the terms of the withdrawal agreement, such goods must be declared to customs and are liable to customs duty, if applicable, and VAT on import.
Thank you, Minister. And that goes to my exact point, that any vehicle that comes in from the UK has VRT and tax. But if you look at electric vehicles at the moment, Minister, and you're saying that you're not responsible for the taxation on second-hand vehicles, you are. Go to any garage in the UK and see 4-year-old electrical vehicles. There's actually loads of them in the UK at the moment that they can't sell. Why? Because an electric vehicle after 4 years of age is out of warranty. Number two, it costs €8,000 to replace a battery in an electric vehicle. So what have they done? All the vehicles that are coming in from the UK are diesels and petrols that are coming into this country, and they're at an inflatable price because people can't buy second-hand electrics because they have no warranty after 4 years, and it's too expensive to replace a battery. Whereas if you have a car with 100,000 kilometres and it's diesel or petrol, it's worth money. If you have an electric vehicle with 100,000 kilometres at the moment, it's worth 8,000 less than what you paid for it because they can't replace the battery. So you're responsible for the tax and the VRT and the tax coming into this country on second-hand vehicles. And remember, 64% of the vehicles in this country are 6 years and older.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, please.
Thanks, Deputy. Yes, I absolutely accept that I and the Government are responsible for taxation policy when it comes to motor vehicles. And while it is the case that the second-hand market for electric vehicles is at the relatively early stages of development, it is happening, and we are seeing more and more second-hand electric vehicles available in the market and being bought. And that's why it's so important that we do continue with a whole range of supports that we have for new electric vehicles, because they will become the second-hand vehicles that are made available in the market. And you're familiar, I don't need to go through all of the different incentives and supports that are there, but we do have a role to play in the development of a second-hand market as well. The Department of Transport has convened a working group in relation to the electric vehicle policy pathway. It's going to be a real challenge to meet the 2030 targets. That will require us supporting and facilitating more people purchasing second-hand electric vehicles, which of course is dependent on them being available in the first place.
Minister, I'll go back to it again. if you buy an electric vehicle at the moment, you're buying at a loss because you can't change it. The government's decision not to proceed with a ban on fossil fuel car sales from 2030 has been criticised by the Electric Vehicle Association, and I wonder why that would be. I personally could not believe that our government were even more zealous than the EU, who said they could not bring in the ban in 2030, but had to wait until 2035 due to a breach of competition rules. So our government here were forcing fossil fuel vehicles to stop in 2030, but the EU now have told you can't do that until 2035 because of competition rules. But yet you're forcing it down the throat of people here that can only barely afford to keep the car that they have on the road at the moment.
Deputy Minister.
Thanks, Deputy. And look, the reality is that there is no escaping the fact that we do have to undergo this transition to using more environmentally friendly vehicles, and it's not easy. We recognise the costs involved in the purchase of electric vehicles at the moment, and that is why we do have a whole range of supports in place. The technology is getting better and better all the time. Battery life is getting better, and the range of these vehicles is also improving. But the transport sector is going to have to play its part in reducing emissions, and unfortunately that does mean for everyone across society that this is a transition we have to work towards. We recognise that government has a leading role to play through our taxation policy to try and nudge behaviour in a certain direction. Of course, it is dependent on the availability of stock, on supply chains, and we will play our part to make sure that there is an adequate supply in Ireland to help people make the transition that I know most of them want to make.
Question 62, Deputy Pearce.